Hello, my friends. My name is Gabriel and I am a concerned Nigerian. Is it actually possible to be a Nigerian and not be concerned when you look at everything going on in the country? When you consider the severe economic hardships that millions of Nigerians face every day, or the security condition that makes all of us feel unsafe in our own country, can you live in the midst of all this and still be unbothered? What makes our case a lot more depressing is that things have always been bad. Every passing year seems like the worst year yet, and there's always this feeling that it's always going to get worse. Nigeria reminds me of my civic education teacher back in secondary school that had the habit of labeling every single set the worst set in the school's history. When a new set comes in and pushes the boundary of what worse can be, he realizes after all that the previous set he labeled worst were not as bad as he had imagined. The case is similar for Nigeria. I remember back in 2018 at my university, I went to a store and I was informed for the first time that an egg now costs 50 naira. I almost lost it that day. I was very furious and wondered if our country had a future. Looking back now, I would trade the whole world for eggs to be 50 naira again. When you listen to people speak about Nigeria and the reasons for our numerous problems, the generic answer you are most likely going to get is that our leaders are bad. Hmm. Our leaders are bad. Our leaders are bad. I've never been satisfied with that answer. I wanted to know more. Do we have bad leaders because the people who elect to office are clueless as regards what needs to be done? Or is it that out of the millions of Nigerians that exist, we just happen to select the most wicked and heartless crop of people to lead us every time? The question on the reason for Nigeria's severe underdevelopment continued to live with me for a long time till I stumbled on a book called Why Nations Fail by Daron Acemoglu. Drawing from the knowledge gained in this book, a magic word explains the primary reason our leaders act the way they do and why our institutions and our economies are structured the way they are. That magic word is incentive. In simple terms, think of incentive as what I stand to gain versus what I stand to lose. Here is a text from the book and I quote, "Poor countries are poor because those who have power make choices that create poverty. They get it wrong not by mistake or ignorance, but on purpose." Put quite simply, there are great incentives for our leaders to keep the country poor, and that is why many countries all around the world are poor. It's a deliberate act and not a mistake. I want you to look at this diagram closely to understand how politics is the master key that locks or unlocks a nation's economy. Here we have political institutions. Political institutions determines who has power in society and to what end this power can be used. The people in power are in turn responsible for determining the type of economic institutions in a country. If the distribution of power is narrow and unrestricted, those who wield this power can set up economic institutions to enrich themselves at the expense of society. To solidify their grip on the economy and to continue to extract from it, they deliberately weaken the political institutions to ensure that power remains within their circle and that they continue to have the ability to exploit the economy to their advantage. While it's not difficult to guess that our leaders want to deliberately keep the country poor for their benefit, the book also reveals an interesting fact that even those countries that their leaders perform seemingly well, they do so because there's more to be gained from performing well and little to benefit from performing poorly while in political office. When the author made this argument, my mind went back to the autobiography of Singapore's president that I read a while ago. He explained the very delicate situation Singapore was at its independence. They had no natural resources at their disposal and they were surrounded by hostile neighbors. In that situation, the Prime Minister explained that the country had no other option than to be excellent in everything they did. In their context, there was incentive to be good, to lead well, and to perform better than others. There was more to be gained from being good than from performing poorly. Now, compare the circumstances of Singapore to that of Nigeria and several African countries at independence. Most of us had a lot of resources at our disposal and we could afford to misuse the resources because we had a large safety net. From a personal perspective, it made more sense to our leaders to extract the resources of the country and keep it for themselves. Once you understand economic incentives, you begin to understand why several national problems remain unsolved for years. As Darren Acemoglu and Robinson puts it in the book, you have to go beyond economics and expert advice on the best thing to do, and instead study how decisions actually get made, who gets to make them, and why those people decide to do what they do. Why would the elites that have a grip of this country want our electoral systems to work as it ought to? Why would they want us to attain uninterrupted power supply if most of them have investments in generator and solar panel businesses? Why would they want our refineries to work? What do they stand to gain if they make good roads and increase our standard of living? Beyond asking what they have to gain, we should also ask the question, what do they stand to lose if they misuse power? The answer is absolutely nothing. If we say that incentive is the determinant of how leaders perform in office and the determinant of the types of institutions that we have, it then begs the question, how do we engineer incentives that lead to good governance and institutions? I also found something in this book that gives a bit of an answer to this when the author mentioned this, and I quote, "Change doesn't happen because a leader suddenly becomes enlightened. It happens when a broad group of people, usually a coalition, gains enough power to challenge the elites and force a shift towards more inclusive and pluralistic rules or institutions." When you look at this statement, it's easy to run with the opinion that the solution to our national problems is to change the leadership. And for this reason, people put much of the effort of their struggle towards leadership change. Beyond change in leadership, I'm of the opinion that more efforts should be channeled towards change in our institutions, because it's our institutions that empowers leaders to behave the way they do. Institutions are the instruments that elites leverage to control the masses and to extract and exploit from the resources of a country. Once you understand that Nigeria's problems are institutional, you begin to see things differently. Why does the power to nominate the head of our electoral commission lie in the hand of the sitting president? Why does the constitution permit the presidential ticket of some parties to run into millions of naira? The 1999 constitution that we use to this day was drafted in less than 2 months. In less than 2 months, you cannot even complete your final year project within that time range, but it was drafted in 2 months. The people who were appointed to create this constitution were constrained by time, so they just copy and pasted the 1979 constitution, made a few tweaks to it, and pushed it out. Till today, a lot of criticism of this constitution still exists, but I'm not about to go into the details of it. I've always had the thought that Nigerians have had a hard time articulating the cause of our problem and what exactly it is that we demand from our government. Demanding for foundational and institutional change is a very important step towards rebuilding our nation. I think I've done a lot of talking for today, and I think it's best that I close the chapter. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.